What is up, party people?
Hello, hello, hello.
Hi. Hello.
Oh, there was another voice. I'd like you guys all to say, salutations, hello, buenos dias, whatever language you speak into our very, very fanatical, very, very fun friend, Frankie. And for all of our little word game friends, there was a lot of F's in that, and none of them was fuck. So Frankie, or Amanda, however, we've just always called her Frankie because there's another Amanda. She
hmm
comes to us as a podcaster from our neighbors in the north. So tell us a little bit about your and Sean's podcast.
Absolutely. So, yes, my name is Amanda, also known as Frankie. I am one half of the podcast, The Haunted and the Strange. Myself and my friend Sean, we bring you weekly segments that drop every Tuesday, where we cover anything weird, eerie, strange, haunting, anything that really piques our interest.
It is they cover some of the best subjects. Your mind is just totally blown.
I love that.
Oh,
Thank you.
absolutely. So what is one of your favorite subjects?
I really like hauntings, but with a lot of history. So I like to do a lot of background. I like a building that's been up for like centuries. And those are the ones I really like to do.
Me too.
I love it. When
Uh,
I was in school, I didn't do the best, but the one subject I liked was history, so I always like the history.
and you'll kind of notice our girl Lav had the shittiest day at work, and so she's actually joining us on her laptop in her car. Um, so
But I
every
am
now and
like
then you'll hear her pop in.
5 minutes from home, so I will be set up and you'll be able to see my ugly face in no time. I mean, and that's how I roll. I'm like, you want me to do this meeting for you? I'm gonna go there stinky. This is gonna happen. Just did an hour and a half at the gym and then I rolled right in there. Did it.
So, have you heard the story of the Pied Piper, the charismatic, delusive leader who made irresponsible promises to naive villagers, entertained numerous people from its fabled pages? From the pages of history comes the Pied Piper in today's episode, a man known to millions of true crime fans, a Pied Piper named Charles Manson. But, party people, before you sigh and mutter, not another Manson story, we're going to discuss the women who blindly followed Manson with the hopes of understanding how a 5'1" nomadic ex con attracted so many faithful women who lived for him
Wait,
and
wait, wait, wait.
eventually
He was only
killed
five
for him.
foot one.
He was
He was
your
really
height.
short.
He's
Oh
your height.
no. Oh no. Oh no. I don't even look at men unless they're like 5'10". I
But
could
this
not
one
be
you
one
could
of
have
his
looked in
followers.
the eyes.
I know, and it would have been weird, and I would have totally hated him.
Well, okay, but I'm 5'6", so I'm 5 inches taller than he
Oh
was.
no.
So
I have a
could you
problem.
imagine it?
I seriously have a problem with short men. Like,
And teeth.
yep, no. I will kill him. I could whip his ass. I don't like that. Men are supposed to be stronger. Like, I shouldn't be able to kick your ass. 5'1" now. Uh-uh.
So grab your drinks, party people, as I see Frankie's got her wine, and let's dive into the women of the most famous cult in history. When Catherine Scher met Manson, she was very lonely. Born in France, Catherine was the product of her mother being raped by a French officer during World War II. Catherine became an orphan after her mother committed suicide. She finally felt a sense of family when she was adopted by an American couple. Death would darken Catherine's doorstep once again when her adopted mom was diagnosed with terminal cancer, but instead of fighting, takes her own life to avoid being a burden. When Catherine was just 16 years old, she was homeless, she was wandering, she was lost, and she met Charlie. He demonstrated everything she wanted. He brought a sense of belonging, and Charlie took Catherine to the side and he came on to her strongly. She'd never had anybody do this. He gave her the name Gypsy, and she immersed herself in his ideas, his vision, his plans without hesitation. You know who did have women figured out was Manson. Because when a
Mm-hmm.
curious 18-year-old Lynette Frome challenged the thoughts and authority of her father, she found herself alone on the streets of Los Angeles. Desperate to belong and desperate to have a family she could relate to. She met Manson and some of the girls on a beach. And it only took a matter of hours, and she had all of her belongings, and she joined the small but growing Manson girls at Spawn Ranch. She took the name Squeaky from Mr. Spawn, who touched her arm, and she squeaked. Squeaky followed Charles' ideals and way of life because of her desire to belong, but more importantly, because of her fear of rejection. The thought of anybody in this group not wanting her to be around or not wanting her devastated her.
Mm-hmm.
Charlie dazzled Squeaky on their first meeting with his animated, unique personality. And as well, his first words to her was, "So your father kicked you out." He had never had a conversation with her. He didn't know her. He just walked up to her on the beach, and that was the first thing he said to her.
That's weird.
So, how he was able to do that is probably still a mystery, and it's probably why so many women joined him and so many women did what they did for him. A 13-year-old Diane Lake was in a unique situation due to her family a few months earlier selling all of their belongings and moved into a bread truck, joining a commune. So it was her mother, her father, her brother, sister, and her. So 5 people in a bread truck. Her father had bought full into the hippie culture of free love, free drugs, and turning his back on society. There was just one problem. Because Diane was 13 years old and sexually active, she was not allowed to stay with the commune. One would think the only logical next step would be the Lake family moving on. But unfortunately, you'd be wrong. Diane's parents instead write a letter of emancipation for her. Alone for months and just celebrated her 14th birthday by herself, Diane meets Charlie. Can you even imagine 13 years old, 14 years old, and you're alone? Totally alone.
No, I can't. Um, that'd be horrible. I know, like, I left home when I was 17 and I still wasn't alone. I had my friends with me, and my brain there wasn't fully developed. So for someone to have to go through that when they're 13 or 14, it's no wonder what ended up happening to her.
And when she questioned her mom about why they made this decision, her mom said, "Well, you were always more of a sister than a daughter to me."
Uh, okay, beat it.
I
Sounds like
don't,
she was better
yeah.
off, but she really wasn't. Yeah. Oof.
No, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's rough.
He was the ultimate hippie. And Diane, like many others, needed that ultimate sense of belonging that Manson projected, and projected better than anybody ever, and still to this day. She said, quote, "He made love to me like no one had ever done. I needed his acceptance."
Ugh,
And that's what
gross.
stuck with her.
Little shudders. That creeps me out because I know what happened.
Sandra Good was born to a very affluent family, but required several surgeries to survive, two of them being tracheotomies before her first birthday. So,
Hmm.
party people, anybody that's not real familiar with the tracheotomy, it's a hole that's put into your neck. It's below your larynx, so it doesn't impact your voice box. Unfortunately, when you have them very young, they can, but it's a hole that's placed there, and a tube is placed in it so that you are able to breathe. Because something is not developed or is deformed in between your pulmonary muscles, your lungs, and your airway. So it's a very extensive surgery, and this
Right.
baby had two of them before she was even a year old. Was cursed with utter misery and major alcohol abuse. You would think Mrs. Good would celebrate the fighting spirit of her baby girl, overcoming health challenges and dealing with the learning disability that her illness has left her with. But instead, Sandra's mother told her daily
Oh,
she was
that's
unwanted
awful.
and that her mother never wanted her to survive. So,
Ugh. I
in
hate
a
all of
house,
this so much.
it's very difficult, especially, being a woman that had self-esteem issues for like 90% of my life. I could see, how easily here's somebody you may not be attracted to, but here's someone that has all of
Hmm.
these friends, air quote, all these people with him, and he pays attention to you, and he's slick,
Hmm.
and he's good with his words, and all these other women, they're following everything he says, and he's giving that attention to you. Hell yeah.
Yeah, they just want to be accepted, and it's disgusting.
Right,
Not
right.
And
that
I
they
mean,
want
if
to
you
be
think about
accepted,
it
that
like
they
that,
got put into that position
to be
because of people that were
honest,
supposed
that's
to
what
take care of them.
yeah.
90% of women, even if you had the best parents, there was always
Mhm.
somebody else saying
Hmm.
something about the way you looked and your weight and your height and everything. So,
Yep.
Yep.
Anything they could rip apart. There's always somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, at the age of 24, Sandra traveled to Topanga Canyon to meet the legendary king of the hippies. So she specifically went to see Manson. She knew he was there and she went to find him.
Hmm.
He walked
oh,
up to Sandra out of the crowd of women and lovingly traced the scars on her neck, looking deep into her eyes and said,
mm.
quote, "Your
Oh,
mother
I
wanted you
I
dead
have heard
because
people
she
say
was
that
jealous of you,"
to other people
end quote.
before, and that is so manipulative.
Yeah. You
Exactly.
know what? I think he was psychic, honestly. How did he know this shit?
He, I honestly, as I researched and researched, I don't know if he was truly psychic or he was just so fucking good
At
that
like
it was a
reading.
guess. It's a good
I mean,
guess.
it doesn't.
Yeah.
I mean, you could take it
Wow.
that either
Okay.
way because
Huh.
he.
Anyways,
Plus,
he's
I mean,
using that
when you
tool.
really think about psychics, like psychics, to be a good psychic, it's a mixture of being able to read a person really well and then also having that other information coming in. Like, you're not a good psychic if you only have one. You
mhm.
they are utilizing both. So,
Right.
And that's how psychics and prophets that don't have the gift, that's how they're able to convince a crowd of people they are psychic, or they do have like different gifts, because they read body language. And not only do they read
Yes.
body language, it's very rare. Think about it, especially this is in the 60s. It was very rare for mothers to not be in their kids' lives. So he
Hmm.
sees that she has, and tracheotomy scars are they're very identifiable. They're because it will be literally here where, yeah,
And the scars
and
are
there
pretty
it's a
thick.
hole, and it's usually the
The
hole
ones
about
that
the
I've
size of
seen,
a
they're like
quarter.
nasty looking scars. They're not
So
pleasant.
anybody,
So he could have just seen these scars and then just like seen the sadness
Yeah,
that
I mean,
was her and was like,
I
okay,
think he
well, your
guessed at who
mom
it was, but
was a
he
piece of
could
shit.
jealous
probably
of you.
tell, like,
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
somebody in her life had done her. Yes, exactly. And it was a guess that it was her mom. And that was a good guess because
It was such a good guess that Sandra, who had a good job, an apartment, and had just bought brand new scuba equipment and other sports equipment to use, sold everything and joined Manson's family within a week of meeting him.
Wow.
Taking the nickname Blue, Sandra confessed that her mind was blown by Charlie's revelations. The happiness she finally felt came from the air quotes truths Charlie relayed to the family. The women were drawn to Manson by the unique way he paid attention to each and every one of them. He seemed to understand them in ways they had never felt before, just like we were just saying. They
Hmm.
were turned away from their families, used by former lovers, and disenchanted by a society obsessed with industry and war. This was, a time frame when everything was, peace and love. The Vietnam War was going on. Um, so society was not in a good place. And during a prison interview in 1977, a reporter asked Manson, quote, "How do you attract so many women?" End quote. Charlie smiled his trademark smile and simply replied, "I was truth and honesty. Society was never truthful or honest with them." End quote. Under the surface, Charlie was putting his real agenda in place. He convinced numerous women to give up their individuality by changing their names, giving up everything, and giving it to Charlie.
Hmm.
And this gave him absolute power. Understand the love and wanting and the acceptance, but giving everything up. And that is one very good thing about my wife and I are polar opposites. But that's one of the good things about living in a world, in a society, and living in a relationship where you can be yourself, and people may not like it, but they can't do anything about it unless you're, you know, uh, committing crimes.
Yeah.
But these women were so destitute in their emotions. They were emotional deserts. They
Hmm.
needed anything. And he knew it. And he gave it.
Hmm. And he found them. And we have to remember too, because this was all in the 70s, right? So us now in the 2020s, we're lucky compared to
but there
these women
wasn't as
50 years
many.
ago, because as much as, yes, there were
Right.
independent women, I'm not saying that there weren't, but you couldn't even open a fucking bank account without getting your husband's signature. Or actually, I was talking to my mom about this not long ago. Like a few weeks ago, she said, my
Right.
first bank account, my dad had to sign for it because they wouldn't
Yeah.
give me one. And she's going to be 70 this year, but like that was their reality then. So she would have been around the same
I mean,
age as
if you
these
really
women.
even think about it,
It's
I can
crazy. We
think
are
of times in
so
my life
lucky
that
to
if
be
somebody
living in the
came
time that we're living
to
in.
me, giving me
Yeah.
the attention that he was giving these women, I may have, at like my lowest points, I may have bought into it.
I can see that. I can think of, honestly, about couple of women that were in my life in the past that if they had given me the kind of attention
And
that
that's
he
exactly
did,
what I'm thinking of.
I
Like,
probably
if
would have still
same
been
thing,
with them
like
and still dealing with their
there's been
bullshit.
points that
Yeah.
he was just really good at being able to find those women, and I don't know, he was a predator is what he was.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And Gypsy believed Manson knew everything and was convinced she'd only be safe with the family. Upon arriving at Spawn Ranch, the women were in the process of being brainwashed. Charlie would ask Gypsy her opinion on tasks he wanted completed. Manson learned from the prison system how to manipulate someone without them even knowing they were being used. He'd tell you what to do, but he'd make you believe it had been your idea all along.
Hmm.
The lines of individuality had been blurred. Charlie taught them to ignore society and the rules of conscious thinking. So he made them everything to each other. And then he convinced them that there was no such thing as guilt, that your conscience
Was he
is
in the
not
military?
it's not a ruling factor. It doesn't even exist. You only feel
Because
better.
that's very like
No, he was in the prison system
military
from
like
the age of
mindset.
7.
Okay.
But it's also a mindset that comes from reform schools. The women became more than just sisters. They were in charge of all of the work that Spawn Ranch needed done: the animals, the stalls, the house, the crops. They did it. They did everything. Manson had complete power over these women, who in turn were completely
I still
enthralled
can't get over the
with
fact that he was
their
only
hippie
5'1".
messiah.
Complex.
Look
I
at no
really
And you're
Pontian.
5'1",
have a
right?
complex. I went on a date with a guy that was like 5'8", and I was like, can't do this. I gotta go. Bye. Like, yes. I'm like, I can see your chin. Like, I can't do this. Like,
He was too short.
I can touch it. I don't want to
Um,
be with you. I can touch your cheek. I don't want to be with you.
I'm 5'3", and I
right.
dated a guy a long time ago that was like basically the same height as me, and I'm like, this is weird.
B. Like, if he came on to you and he was doing these things to you that he's doing to these other women, what do you think your reaction would be? Mm-hmm.
I think honestly, if it were me, and Manson was trying to
There you
recruit me,
go.
I
Okay.
don't think he would use himself. I think he would use the other women.
Yeah.
He probably did a lot of that.
He would
I wonder how often he
Yeah.
just did that in general.
all the time.
Yeah,
Yes.
like, oh,
And having
all
like
its
that
friends. Because
close
what else
group
does a woman
of
want
women
except for like a
friends,
really
yeah.
good friend, right? Like, it's hard out there.
Well, right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Hmm.
And it wasn't
Yeah.
they didn't look at each other as competition for Manson, because Manson made his rounds. And
Hmm.
when he wasn't making his rounds, he had the women busy doing things for each other. Um, and so you always had this sense of sisterhood. You always had this sense of family. And then
Yeah.
when it came your turn to be, intimate or have that attention that he was giving out, you felt so lucky and so honored that you went back to the other women to tell them what he had done. And they were happy for you that he did these things, that he gave this stuff
Hmm.
to you.
It's fucking wild.
Yeah. In 1968, the whole dynamic of the Manson family was going to change. And it began with a 19-year-old runaway by the name of Leslie Van Houten.
Hmm.
Leslie, who went by several aliases, was mainly called Lulu. was a personification of the American high school girl. She was homecoming queen and a long-haired California beauty. But all that changed when her affluent parents divorced. The cool kids now shunned her. Leslie began using drugs and became pregnant. I'm going to give you a heavy trigger warning here, guys, because even for me, this was rough. And I don't usually, it doesn't usually get real rough for me, but this was. Her mother forced her to have an illegal back alley abortion. And as if nothing could be worse, Leslie's mother had the fetus buried in their home's backyard. So not only does Leslie have to have an abortion, she has to carry the aborted fetus home and bury it in her backyard.
It's punishment.
Just fucking shoot me. Just fucking shoot me.
Yeah, that was punishment.
Leslie had started doing drugs, and after this incident, her addiction becomes worse. Lost and alone, Lulu joins the ever-growing hippie movement, where she meets Gypsy. 3 weeks later, Lulu arrives at Spawn Ranch looking for acceptance and the family atmosphere Gypsy had told her only Charlie could provide. So this is exactly what we were just saying, is he didn't always go and find them. Sometimes he sent the girls out to find them.
Mm-hmm.
And think about if you're used to being the cool kid. I was never the cool kid. I'll never be the cool kid. I don't fucking care. But if you're used to being the cool kid and you're used to a type of environment, where like, hey, you walk onto campus and everybody's like, oh, there's Leslie. Hi, Leslie. Hi. To, oh, her parents are divorced, and turning their back completely on him. I could see why she would start doing drugs.
You know what keeps getting to me with all of this is it's like, I know the end of this story and how fucking horrible that is, but each and every one of these women and these stories and how they got there, and when they like get that sense of acceptance, I'm like, oh, yay for them.
It's
It's just really fucked up because of what they end up doing. Anyways, I was just thinking about that. Like, how fucked up am I that I think that I'm happy for her? I'm happy that she found some people that like her. It's horrible.
Just like Lav just said, it's a mind fuck. It absolutely is, because every woman in their life has had a need for another woman, and not in a non-platonic way, but they've needed that sisterhood. They've needed that acceptance. And not only are you getting it from one woman, you show up at her spot and there's 20 other women there that act the same way. And you do feel that. You feel that little inner celebration. Finally, these women whose fucked up families kind of threw them away are now in an environment where they're loved.
Yeah.
But love hurts.
Yeah.
Love hurts. By 1969, the family was completed with the arrival of Linda Kasabian, a 20-year-old homeless mother, Patricia Kremwinkle, called Katie, who grew up an outcast, shunned by her family, and had a desire to live free and find her sense of home. The last woman in this trio was a quirky 18-year-old, Susan Atkins. Abandoned by her family, Susan, called Sadie, could be juvenile and annoying to the other women, but she was fiercely loyal to Charlie. It's also in 1969 that Manson begins feeding the women copious amounts of LSD. Some of the women recounted the group LSD trips as a lesson about what society was really about, at times reenacting the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, where Charlie would be tied to the cross, embodying a Christ-like image.
Mm.
So, not only, ladies, is he your father, lover, provider, he's also your God.
Right.
Yikes. Run.
I don't even know. I don't think mentally I could put all of my
It's
eggs
crazy.
in that basket, so to speak. Like I don't think one man could fill all of that for me like he is for those other women. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. But
Mhm.
take into consideration too, um, we are 70s and 80s babies. Our mothers and fathers and aunts, uncles, grannies, whomever our generation's caregivers were, they grew up in that time. And at that time, because my mom said the greatest thing she wanted, the only thing she wanted out of life was to be married and have kids. And when my father proved to not be that kind of man and she dumped him, she never went to try to find another husband simply because, and that's what these women were going through. But we were raised by the other side of that, where they're like, no, do not put all your eggs into one basket. Do not put all of your hopes and dreams into one person. You be strong. You go for your dreams. You go for what you want. And then if you're lucky enough to find someone who supports you in it, damn right, but you don't need them. You want them, you don't need them.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
don't
but
know. I don't
Stacy
think
does
I
have a
could
good point. I guess it really
put
is kind
all
of
of my eggs in that basket either.
how we were raised.
Mm-mm. Yeah. We are strong women who are raised by strong women who are raising strong women.
Hmm.
And on top of that, we're also raising our boys to be men that do not have that complex of they have to seek, destroy, and rule.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
Hmm.
And control does not need to be one
Yeah.
of those things. And I think that's really important. And it used to be women were controlled.
we are property. We were
Mm.
property. And if you didn't marry
Yeah.
well, you died. You
Yeah.
died. Either you died a slow emotional death where you were in a situation of making money that you did not want to be in,
Hmm.
or you were married to a good for nothing and that was just your life. Or you got
Yeah.
lucky and the handsome rich guy that owned the
Hmm.
plantation, you caught his
Hmm.
eye and you lived in wealth.
Yeah. It was a struggle.
hmm Charlie changed dramatically. Not only did Charlie use their LSD trips as grasps of knowledge, but he built a widespread panic in the women at the same time. So not only was he using their LSD trips as a way to indoctrinate into them his belief of society and his beliefs on their place in this world, he was also pretty much starting a mass hysteria within the women. He taught them that the world was in total conflict, and only Charlie knew what was right and what was wrong. Nobody else knew. The politicians, the religious leaders, the teachers, nobody. Nobody knew what was right and what was wrong except Charlie. That's scary.
It goes, yeah, it
That's
goes back to
scary.
that like I am everything. Nobody else yeah, it is actually
hmm
really scary.
it is completely describing these women as sheep, and he
Hmm.
was their shepherd. They didn't know what to do, how to do it, or where to do it unless he led the way. And that's scary.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's like politicians, but you only have one. You only have one choice.
Yeah. And you believe with your full heart that choice is the only one. It's not even
Yeah.
that there are other options. He is it.
Yes, it's very
right.
yeah, like on the politician side, it's very like 1984. Like it's very
Oh yeah.
Still
Oh yeah.
bizarre to me that these women are. I mean,
Uh,
did not
the
a single
paranoid.
one of them? Because for me, like, I mean, we've talked about before, like the weird things I've done in the bedroom, but I'm still like, I get jealous. You know what I mean? Like, did not a single one of them have that inkling of? And that's bizarre to me. Like, I don't, I don't know if I could share with one woman, let alone
Mhm.
10.
It is weird.
It, yeah, and I think again, I think that goes back to since they believed he was the only one um for them, that they just felt honored when he did show them the type of attention they wanted. And a lot of the things that he did with and for the women, he did them
But
in
that I
groups. I don't think that's what it is. I mean, because there were a couple of men, there were other men that were kind of scattered in and out. So
okay.
they were getting what they needed, from these men as well. And I did read somewhere that the women were
How
affectionate
much
and sexual at
how much
times
of
to
this
each other as
do
well.
you think, how much effect is the drugs having on this mindset and this?
80% of it. 80%. He because that's when he did most of his indoctrinating, is he would get them all high on LSD, and as they were tripping, that's when he would start. That's when he started talking about the race wars. That's when he started telling them like, "Hey, Blackie's gonna come up, gonna take Whitey down, and we need to be on
Mhm.
top of that because if we're at the bottom of that revolution, we're gonna be extinct. We're gonna be extinguished. So we got to be up here. We got to be above Blackie." Because Blackie's they're gonna need a leader because they're animals that can't do it alone. So they're gonna need a leader to show them where to go. And Charlie was gonna be that leader. And the women bought into it because they were stoned. So there was no free will, there was no free thought. And then when they'd come off this trip, he was still saying the same things. So it's like, oh, it
Yeah.
wasn't just because I was tripping. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, yeah, that's the way it goes. Gaslighting. Absolute
Major
gaslighting.
gaslighting. So we have somebody who clearly has some like insane mental issues that are
What was it? What's
That
his
had
actual
mental issues.
diagnosis?
that also had mental issues. Yeah.
He was bipolar, but he also had manic narcissism. And they
I've known a few
believe,
people with that.
oh yeah, I've dated a few narcissists.
Yeah.
Um, but he also, although he was not like our Ted Bundys and our Gacy's that have, very high IQs, his IQ was not high, but he was brilliant. And they say he's from the streets. He is school of hard knocks. He was a
Hmm.
fucking master graduate of the school of hard knocks because he went into reform school, like I said, like at 7 years old. And he was in and out of the prison system his whole life. Even when he was starting to collect his women, he was in and out. And the prison taught him. They taught him how to get what he wanted, get what he needed, and how to get people to give it to him. He
That's how
didn't
he
have
survived in prison.
yeah, being 5 foot fucking one, yeah.
You gotta learn. Yeah. I don't think I would have survived, just saying.
So Manson was good. He played on their fears of rejection by convincing them no one would ever love them like he did if they
Mm.
found anyone who would love them at all.
Ooh,
But
yeah.
Charlie's facade was beginning to crumble as he began testing his power over the women. Snake craved sex with Charlie, but mostly she craved the feeling of being super special to him again. Being the youngest, Manson tested limits of power with Snake by taking her into an abandoned shack on the outskirts of the ranch. Instead of the sweet, gentle lover she'd previously known, Manson sodomized her and violently raped her. As she lay there injured and crying, Manson mutters to her, "Well, that's how it's done in prison." Snake was terrified of Manson, but still found herself wanting his attention and needing his acceptance. But there's back to the prison system. July 1969 would end up being pivotal in Manson's family dynamic, beginning with Manson killing a Black Panther over a bad drug deal. As Charlie became excessively paranoid, he introduced an attractive but arrogant musician named Bobby Beausoleil to the family as an extra soldier against the race war Charlie was convinced was coming. Manson began programming his women into obedient warriors, ready and willing to kill to protect their master. So he basically took a puppy. This is what happens with pit bulls. This is why people fear them. Is you get this cute little puppy and you love him and they're adorable. And then they get a little bigger and you start training them and teaching them to protect you. And then is when the fucked up people come in and they turn this obedient, loyal, beautiful animal into a fucking killing machine
Mm-hmm.
that will do anything for its master. And that's what Manson did to these women. Manson pulled Squeaky and Snake aside and began convincing them they had to kill to keep from being killed. Squeaky remembers thinking, when the time comes, I hope I'll be ready to kill. I hope I'll be as my fellow sisters. In an attempt to jumpstart the race war, Beausoleil kills Gary Hinman and then staged it to frame the Black Panthers. Beausoleil is arrested for Hinman's murder. Charlie's plan was to send his women out to kill more people in the same modus operandi that Hinman was killed. This was to make the police think Beausoleil was innocent. The last three pieces of Charlie's revolution fell into place. He saw his soldiers in Sadie, Lulu, Katie. They had a no questions asked love for Manson because these four women were more susceptible to Manson's delusions and more susceptible to his brainwashing. They were the Kasabian and Krimwinkle and Atkins were the first set of women chosen to prove their loyalty in blood. Along with Tex Watson, arrived at 1050 CeeLo Drive. Sharon Tate, along with her house guests, became immortalized in the true crime annuals due to the brutality Manson's girls left in their wake. Upon their return, Charlie separated the women and demanded they speak to no one. Manson's need-to-know policy for the family had just been born. So what he did is he took these women, they went out, they killed, and then he took them and he separated them from the group. You don't get to talk to anybody. You don't get to see anybody unless I tell you it's okay. What you did there was for me. And you don't talk about it. Because what happens, what's the Navy saying, Lav? Loose lips sink ships. And Charlie's need to know basis when what it
That
was
sounds
is the women
exactly
would
like the
ask him
Navy.
things and he'd say, "You don't need to know that." Like with Beausoleil, Gypsy goes to Manson and asks him, "Where's Beausoleil?" And he's like, "He's in jail." She goes, "Well, I'll go see him and we'll figure
Yeah.
out how to help him." He goes, "No, you won't. I got it covered."
Mind your business.
Mind your business. Exactly.
Mhm. Yeah.
You do what I tell you to do. Charlie leads Leslie Van Houten away from the other women and begin priming her for the next set of murders. He asked her, "Are you crazy?" She replied, "Yeah, I am." Manson stared her in the eyes and asked, "Crazy enough to go out and kill someone for this?" Without even a heartbeat passing, Leslie goes, "Yeah, yeah, I am." And he motioned to the family in the background of Spawn Ranch. And Leslie was solidified in her loyalty. At 3301 Waverly held no significance to Manson. The CeeLo Drive held significance to Manson because he believed that a record producer who was supposed to buy his songs and make him a famous musician still lived there.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it wasn't. It had been sold, and an 8 months pregnant Sharon Tate was there with her friends. The LaBiancas, strangers to him, when the deadly trio of Katie, Tex, and Leslie fled from the Waverly property. Lino LaBianca had been stabbed numerous times and had the word war carved into his abdomen. Rosemary had been tied up. She had a pillowcase put over her head and screamed for her husband as she listened to him be killed. And then it only took a minute, and Leslie Van Houten stabbed her 22 times. Fully immersed in his paranoia, Charlie and his women drive stolen cars 200 miles away from Spawn Ranch to Death Valley. Okay, you just committed two big crimes, two major murders. You have desecrated the bodies. You have written on the walls in blood. And you fucking steal
Right.
cars to go drive somewhere?
You're an idiot.
That's that goes to show just the level. He
Nope,
was
not at
street
all.
smart, but he
None.
had no common sense. If he could convince these women to kill for him, why couldn't he convince women to give them their cars?
Yeah, really. I'm sure they had vehicles. Like, seriously, why aren't you just driving those? Why are you stealing cars? Heat score.
Says Manson prepared the family for life in the desert. LAPD arrived, arresting most of the family on grand theft auto. The girls were all kept in the same cell. Squeaky cautioned Gypsy and Snake to stay quiet, but it ended up being Sadie who confessed to her cellmate about killing Sharon Tate. Quote, "I just laughed when I raised the knife and she begged. She kept saying, 'Please let me have my baby.' And I felt nothing for
Oh
her
God.
as I stabbed her in her stomach." When Susan Atkins was doing her jailhouse, doing her prison interviews, she one time said deadpan into a reporter's camera that she considered cutting the baby out of
Wow.
Sharon Tate
I've
and
never heard that.
taking it to Manson as a trophy.
Oh my
And
gosh, no.
I watched that interview because I watched all the interviews they did and I watched it, and I kid you not, she was blank. There was no emotion when she talked about the murders. But then when she started talking about Charlie and the other girls, she became really animated like a little kid.
I'm like,
So she was almost like robotic.
Very, very.
Ugh. Is this the
which,
one that kept trying to get appeals? Or is
yeah,
that the other? Yeah. Ooh.
yeah. Um, we'll get to that, but just real quick. So, of all of the Manson women that were imprisoned for these murders, there between all of them and Tex Watson, there
Wow.
were over 100 attempts at appeals, and every 100 of them were denied.
Good.
Yep.
Right.
Good. Good thing they weren't in Canada. They probably would have gone off.
The women arrived in court every day. Blue would visit Charlie in the attorney's room as his legal and spiritual advisor. Squeaky Fromm testified that Manson did not control them. He did not raise them, and he was not their leader. Manson blamed the women. Quote, I told them to do something witchy, end quote. As prosecutors searched for the undeniable proof, Manson was in control. The women in the audience provided it. Gypsy and Blue led some of the other women to stand and repeat things Charlie would say. So when Charlie stood up and said something, the women stood up right behind him and
Okay.
repeated it verbatim. When Manson showed up to court with an X tattooed on his forehead, the women showed up with X's carved into theirs. Now, some people believe the carvings on the Manson families are inverted crosses. They're not. They are X's because Charlie told the women to X themselves out of society.
Okay.
So that was their demonstration. They X'd themselves. The women were sent to jail for 4 days for contempt and then banned from the courtroom. But that didn't stop them from holding vigil in front of the Supreme Court. So that's how Manson was convicted of these murders, is because he kept telling them over and over and over. And even had some of the more like intellectually advanced women getting up and telling him like he doesn't control us. He didn't do anything. This was all them. They wanted to do it and they did it. But they screwed themselves over when the lower level women, the more primal ones, just did
Mhm.
everything they could to demonstrate their allegiance to Manson.
Hmm.
So, here in the aftermath, when Snake testified at 16 years old to the grand jury, when she was asked her name, replied for the first time in 3 years, Diane Lake. My heart broke when I heard her tell the grand jury. And I'm not even going to lie, guys. I teared up when I heard her say this. She said, quote, my name is
Oh.
Diane Lake. I'm 16 years old and I want my mommy.
Hmm.
A woman who said, you're more my sister than my daughter.
You still wanted her, which, yeah, of course she would.
Yeah. Diane would go on to spend 90 days in a deprogramming therapy program. And she credits this as life saving. Sandra Blue Good is the opposite, crediting Charlie as her savior and criticizes the public for calling the family murderers. Quote, you want to talk about evil and demonic? Go to Hollywood. No one touches that evil. Yeah, we skimmed it. We touched it. It needed to be touched. How can you point at us and call us evil? We were soldiers.
Hmm.
Killing in war is not murder. It's funny, funny in an ironic way. She's talking about how evil and demonic Hollywood was or is at this time. And this was before the whole Me Too movement, before the Epstein, before all of the Hollywood sexual, physical, and financial abuse has started coming out, she was talking about how evil it was. I don't want to give her too much credit because she,
Right.
was
I mean,
brainwashed and programmed like everybody else, but she
it's been
wasn't
going
wrong.
on since the
No,
beginning of
absolutely not.
Hollywood.
Look at Shirley Temple and Judy Garland. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. Liza Minnelli,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, all
Yeah.
the way now to Amanda Bynes.
Mm-hmm.
A lot, a lot of others.
Yeah.
Catherine Gypsy Share in 1971 was sent to prison for armed robbery. As fate would have it, Gypsy was housed in a special security housing along with Atkins, Van Houten, and Krimwinkel. Patricia would go back and forth between loving Charlie and hating Charlie. Catherine, fearful for her son, growing up and being an orphan like she did, got her life together. Quote, I was so sad for the victims. It's still hard for me to imagine the warm, beautiful women he turned into killers.
Warm, beautiful women.
That fed each other, that cared for each other, that was a family. He was a cancer
Yeah.
and he infected everybody that he came in contact with. Leslie Van Houten almost instantly saw the cracks in Charlie's persona, and after talking to other inmates, said, quote, Charlie isn't special. It's what all pimps and hustlers do. Because how does a pimp get that woman out on the street and have her degrade herself for pennies on a dollar just to turn around and give that dollar to him?
Makes you
You're
feel good.
special. You're special. No one's like you. I love you. I will always love you. Now, if you love me, you'll go out
You'll
and
do
do
this.
this. Yeah. Lynette Squeaky Fromm, living in Sacramento, decided to go to speak with visiting President Gerald Ford. She was living with Blue at the time. And she said to Blue, I need to go talk to him about Charlie. What if he doesn't listen to me? Blue says, take a gun. He'll listen then. So, wanting to be reunited with the others, she served 34 years for an assassination attempt on President Gerald Ford. And, and even now, her love for Charlie has never wavered. Some believe they should have been given their lives back since they showed remorse, but prison tends to make people pretty remorseful. You're not
And
remorseful for
honestly,
what
I
you
feel
did.
like
You're remorseful because you got caught.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like even though they were easily manipulated and he took advantage of them being in a weak mindset and everything like that, they still lacked empathy and they still lacked like just any basic mental capacity to say this isn't right. Like, you prostitutes, they may be going out there and having sex trying to earn a dollar, but they're not out there killing people. Like it's hard to compare the two. They shouldn't. I agree. They should be locked
Exactly.
away still because if he can do
Yeah.
that to them, then anyone can. Mm-hmm.
Well,
Absolutely. Yes.
and none of them ever showed remorse.
No. No. And that's it. Yes. I feel bad for them that they were manipulated, just like Lavender has just said, and Stacy agrees.
Right.
Like, but they did these things. They are criminals and they should be in jail.
Yeah. Charlie Manson died in prison on 11/19/2017 of natural causes. And he spent years manipulating women. In the last couple of years of his life, he got manipulated by a woman.
Did he?
Very young. Yep. I'm not even going to say her name because it's not even worth it.
No.
A very young woman manipulated him, got him to marry her in a jailhouse
Gosh.
ceremony because he was going to die in prison regardless. He was never coming out. She
Right.
wanted custody of his body because she wanted all of his property so she could divvy it up and sell it. And one of the things being his brain. She wanted to sell his brain
That's a
to
smart
a
woman right
museum
there.
or to be studied. And
Did
uh-huh.
okay, yeah.
But here
Did she?
but here's no, because what happened is Charles Manson has two biological sons that he's got more, but there were two that stepped up. They found each other, realized they were half brothers, and they went to bat for the people that had been killed. And they stood up and said, you know what? You may have married him, but he is our father. So we are his next of kin. And the court's like, yeah, they are. And immediately, within 5 minutes, because he still had the heart monitors on, within 5 minutes of his heart stopping, he was put into a pine box and he was cremated. Less than an hour
She
later,
could
he
have.
was nothing but
She
dust.
still could have
She didn't
sold the
even get
dust for
any of the
something.
dust. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah,
And they were
it's a
Stacy
awful
huge thing.
of clowns and stuff.
Gacy sold so many paintings. They were terrible. Yeah, terrible. And Richard Ramirez sold doodles and sketches.
Mm.
Ted Bundy sold poems and he just would write letters. Um, because
Good for his
unfortunately
sons, honestly,
yeah, they said
to just put an end to it.
they wanted that evil done. They wanted it ended and they wanted no more. They didn't want any part of him left on this earth.
Good. That's good.
Susan Atkins died in prison in 2009 of brain cancer.
Mhm.
Linda Kasabian turned state's witness and was given immunity for her testimony. Kasabian changed her name and moved out of California. She actually
Oh
got
wow!
to
So just
Oregon.
recently.
She died in March of 2023. And another reason, too, these last two reasons are why I really wanted to do this. Leslie Van Houten was paroled in
Wow.
in July of 2023. She hasn't even been paroled a year yet. And Patricia Krimwinkle, on her 17th attempt at parole, was denied in October of 2022. And she is still considered by California's democratic system and government,
Wow.
the governor, is still considered a threat to society because she has never once made any comments about what she did, how bad it was. And because like Van Houten would go to the parole board every time and she would tell them pretty much the same thing, like, hey, this man used me, he brainwashed me, I had no idea what I was doing and I did it because he told me to. And they would come back to her and in so many words be like, bullshit, you were an adult, you were of sound mind, you knew what you were doing. And it was when she finally went back to the parole board and said, I realize what I've done, I did it and I'm sorry for it. But what I'm even more sorry for is the fact that I let a man turn me into a monster. And if you
Mhm.
never release me, I understand why. And that was the
Right.
turning point for them.
Well, that is her admitting guilt and not putting it on somebody else. Finally.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Hmm.
When the former DA of Los Angeles County was asked why, over 50 years later, are the Manson women still feared, said, quote, even in death, he fears Manson still has a hold on these women. Also, it's scary how easily God's nurturing creatures were turned into stone cold killers. One of the women, Mary Brower was her name, or yeah, is her name. She was the one that had the first of Manson's sons. And 11 years, I think, after Manson was convicted and in jail, she tried to hijack a plane out of LAX to fly to San Quentin to break him out of jail.
What the fuck?
Yep, she did, and she did 40 years because of it.
Wow.
I think as true crime enthusiasts, we knew the man, we didn't know the women.
Yeah.
And these women deserve to have their story told. But not only did they deserve to have their story told, they deserved that understanding and that respect for the lives that they lost. But, and the family, LaBianca's family, and Tate's family, and all of those that
Mhm.
were injured
I
and
agree.
killed, they deserved
I mean,
justice.
how much?
He was a con man. So he could read a
Absolutely.
person from across the room. And when I think about the Manson family, I think about lions, because think about it. In the pride, the strongest members of the pride are the women. They take
Right,
care of
exactly.
the cubs, they take care of each other, and they take care of the lazy male lions that lay around and eat the antelope and,
Scratch
take,
their cat
Right.
balls.
I was going to say scratch their cap and just take naps all day long. But when the pride has to be protected, they do the protecting.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what happened here. Manson wanted to be the Messiah. He wanted to be Jesus Christ. And he created a society around him that would treat him that way. And everything was nirvana, paradise, heaven for him until somebody opened their mouth.
Mm-hmm.
Because in truth, if Susan Atkins had never confessed, they would have never pinned these murders on them. They would probably still be unsolved today. But that's what happens when you have somebody that has felt like a nobody their whole life, and now all of a sudden they feel like they're a super villain. They're the baddest shit around.
Yeah, you're gonna gloat.
Yeah. And she was small in stature. She was small in stature as well. So not only was it like, look at this man trusted me to save him, I was badass enough that I stabbed a pregnant woman in her belly.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Ugh.
And I would love to say, guys, this would probably, because we've learned from this, it'll never happen again. But
It will.
Lav and I have
Right.
even discussed cases where it has happened. Lori Vallow.
Mm-hmm.
So on that note, party people, thank you so much for joining us again. Go check out our good friend Frankie and her good friend Sean. They've got the chills, they've got the thrills, and so catch us on the flip side. I was waiting for you. Like, no, we got to do that
Oh, I
again,
was
dude.
delayed.
You
Okay.
no. Give me a little bit more.
Bye,
Delayed.
bitches.
Yes. And there it is.
Top of the day, everyone. I'm Nisha.
And I'm Buddha Badass.
And we're the hosts of Hot Garbage True Crime Edition. Do you guys like true crime?
I really don't. I feel like you force me on this show every freaking time I come here.
Do you guys enjoy listening to victims and murderers and grotesque stuff?
People that are sick in the freaking head, that's who likes it. That's who likes it.
Well, if you like that kind of stuff, then you should totally check us out. I mean, every single Thursday, we drop the most hottest cases, and we have fun while doing it.
You drop the most hottest cases? You drop murder and death. Kill. Death.
How many people can actually say that they have fun while listening to a true crime podcast? And I feel like that's what we do here.
So you're just not going to listen to me now? I'm just going to say this and you're not going to listen to me?
And you know what? Our listeners are not just our listeners, but they're our friends and our trash pandas. We love you guys.
They're a lot, and I will agree to that part, but I'm still just mad at you for just not talking to me. They're paying you this well to say all this.
So check out Hot Garbage on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere that you listen to podcasts. Check us out every single Thursday. A new episode drops.
I officially hate this commercial. On some real.